in London and Rome, 8:30 and 9:30 a.m. Wednesday morning in Australia. I think it's 3:30 in the afternoon in New Zealand on Wednesday, and it's Facebook Live. And I am thrilled to have my good friend, Dr. Michael Nelson, with us today. And Dr. Nelson is the founder and CEO of Brain Bean Nutrition. And we're going to talk brain today. And we're going to talk specifically about some aspects of feeding your brain properly. So as you start throwing your questions in, if you can, orient them more around your questions on brain function. And that's where we'll be focusing. So first, Dr. Nelson, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. O'Brien. It's a pleasure to be with you and see you again.
Yes, yes, it is. It's always a pleasure. We are very much like-minded souls. And when we met, I just resonated with you right away as a brother from another mother. And, and we're both geeks, and we start talking geek every once in a while. So we'll do our best not to go down a rabbit hole tonight. Here to begin with, I just want to say it's a pleasure. And the first topic that we want to begin with is about fish oils and why fish oils are so important for us in general, and then specifically for the brain. So, Dr. Mike, you want to start there with that one?
Sure. So omega-3 fatty acids, or fish oil, is something that's essential. Our body doesn't make it. So we have to get that and put it into our body so that our cells can be healthy. And in order to get enough of it, we have to actually be consuming, on a regular basis the omega-3 fatty acids. If we don't, then we usually end up with a deficiency of sorts, and that shows up in a number of different ways. And they're kind of nondescript signs and symptoms that show up as deficiencies. And most people don't even recognize that they're deficient because number one, they don't measure whether or not they've got enough of the fish oil in their body, and
right.
there's ways to do that, and that's
simple ways to measure.
Exactly. I mean, it's a home-based test, right? So it's absolutely vital today that we end up with enough of the omega-3 fatty acids in our diet and supplementing with them so that we can maintain the integrity of each and every cell. I think what people should really recognize about fat is that fat is what makes up our cells. And it comprises the membrane of the 75 trillion cells that make up you and us. And when those fats are distorted because we don't have enough of the right type of fat, such as the omega-3 essential fats, that membrane then changes the way in which it works. And
let me break that down for people a little bit. So the membrane is the walls around the cell. It's the boundary, it's the walls that contain all the stuff that's inside the cell. And if you don't have enough of the right materials, you build your house out of straw instead of brick. So if you don't have enough of the right kind of fats in your diet, and fats are the primary component of the membranes, and if you don't have enough of the right kind of fats for that, then your body's going to use whatever fats it can get a hold of.
That's correct.
So for most people, what that means is the membranes, the fats that make up the structure of the walls of their cells, are made out of French fries and onion rings and sugar donuts and the bad fats. And I'd like to give one more visual on this just to start us off. And that is, and I'm going to date myself here, and Dr. Mike is not too far behind me on this one, but when we were kids, and if you needed to do a urine sample at the doctor's office, you go in the bathroom, urinate into a cup, you put it in this little shelf on the wall, and the shelf turns around and it opens up in the other room. It's called a lazy Susan. And that lazy Susan, then the nurse is on the other side and takes that and does whatever test she's going to do. Your brain cells communicate to each other through lazy Susans. That one brain cell makes some chemicals to the cell to the next cell through the walls of the next cell, and then they make that cell makes some chemicals, modifies it a little bit, and it goes to the next one through the membranes. So if you don't have the right kind of membranes that allow these chemicals to go back and forth between the cells, you've got rusty, lazy Susans, and they don't work very well, right? Your brain cells don't communicate very well. That's right. Why the types of fats you are eating are so critically important. Now, I'm going to let Dr. Nelson take over, but because this is Facebook Live, I always like to acknowledge people that are here. So I've got it up on my screen now, and I'm just going to give a shout out here to a couple of people. So bear with me for a minute while we just say hello. And Dwayne Keys is here from California. Honor Harris is here from Wales, the UK. Becky says, hello, doctor. Looking forward to the topic. Thank you, Becky. Honor says, what's the best form of omega-3 for those allergic to fish and seafood? Good question. We'll get to that one. Dr. Mike will answer that first once we get back to him. Maggie's here from Cleveland. Kelly's in Indiana. Colleen's in Naples. Jill has a question. I'll get to that in a minute, Jill. Gwendolyn says, hello to both of you from New Zealand. I find fish oil hard to digest, so use Sacha Inchi oil. Great, thanks for the comment, and we'll reference that. Cynthia says, I really dig Dr. Tom's analogies. Well, thank you, Cynthia. Chris Lennis is watching. I don't know if that's my family of Lennises. Chris, if you're part of the family based out of Detroit, but if you are, hello, cousin. Willis is here. I'd be more concerned with the pesticides in the grains. Good point, Willis. Those are worth being concerned about. I'm not sure on a hierarchy if it's more important or not, but good point. Martha's here from Dayton. Quincy's here. Says, happy Tuesday evening. Jillian's here from Cleveland. Anita's here from Denmark. Kat's here and says, I'm so confused as a vegan, what type of supplement to get for omega-3s and 6s? The proper ratios, not chia, etc., but a supplement. And hello from Kentucky. Good question, Kat. And I'll pause here because we have a couple of questions now that we've gotten to. And Dr. Mike, can we just jump into those a bit?
Sure. Let's probably address the first question, which was, what would be the best form of fish oil that's not marine derived or animal derived?
Right.
When it comes to the brain, I want to be real clear on this. There is no substitute. There's absolutely zero substitute for that. So you can get omega-3 fatty acids from vegetable sources. However, they're not going to be the form that's used in your brain because your brain is primarily composed. It's 90% of the brain in the omega-3 format in the brain is 90% of it is composed of DHA. And there's no vegetable source of DHA or other sources. You need to get that from a marine source, unfortunately, or
now,
fortunately.
May I just pause you there? You just dropped a load in the space.
Yeah.
That, and people have not heard this before.
Yeah.
But this is accurate. This is science that the omega-3s as a category, yes, you can get omega-3s from other sources, but not DHA. And DHA is the component of the membranes, 90% of the membrane of the omega-3s in the membrane of the brain cells are DHA. Correct. And you can't get it. You can't get it from other sources. So that's a jaw dropper. That just for vegetarians, and that just rocks their boat. So what I'm going to suggest for those people that are vegetarian and have been trying really hard to get enough of the omega-3s and finding it more difficult than they thought it would be, is that this is really important for you. and that you take time to learn more about this concept of DHA and the brain. You can Google DHA and the brain, and you can start reading some of the articles. It's going to take you a week, a few weeks, a couple of months before you see the consistent reports that you must get DHA for your brain. There's no way around it as far as I know, and as Dr. Nelson is saying, he doesn't know either of a way around that.
There isn't. I actually interfaced with some of the world's top scientists in the space. They run our tests for us. We have a home-based test that we can run to determine your brain omega levels, and there's literally no other source to get the DHA. Now, there's going to be some questions that might come up regarding the changing EPA, eicosapentaenoic acid, into DHA. And that process is extremely sluggish and non-existent for the majority of the people. So there's not a lot of that to convert over, and you can't do it in adequate amounts to maintain the DHA concentrations that you need in the brain, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's my problem with flaxseed oil as your source, as your exclusive source of omega-3s, is that the conversion, and as I read the studies on the conversion of EPA to DHA, as I started reading these, I just had the image, and I'm dating myself here, back to the 60s of Mr. Natural, the cartoon character. You know, that he just moves very slow as he's going through life. That's the conversion of EPA to DHA. Very, very slow, right? And when you read, because you'll read articles by people who are not scientists say, well, you can just convert EPA to DHA, and here's how you do it. But they don't tell you how slow the process is and how minimal the amount of DHA that you get from this is. So Dr. Nelson's right on the money with what he's saying with this one.
Yeah, and in addition, increased inflammation, increased leaky gut, increased aging, all inhibit that conversion even more. So you'll end up with even less the older you get, and the more of the inflammatory process that takes hold in your body. So, you know, that was one of the reasons that I went to great lengths when I put together my Brain Omega product. Was I needed to have a very clean source of omega-3s that was sustainably farmed. We have an IFOS, International Fish Oil Standards oil, meaning that it's the highest most sustainably harvest, cleanest oil that you can possibly get. It's the top of the food chain when it comes to fish oil. It's not something you find in Costco. So we went to the purest.
May I ask, and I know that you can do a deep dive into this, but when you talk about the quality of the oil, you went to the highest, the purest farmed, and when you said farmed, my mind immediately went to farmed fish, and that they're not healthy for you, that there's lots of chemicals in them, and it's not the way that nature expects fish to be. Is that what you're referring to? Is that we're using farmed salmon or farmed fish to pull this DHA out?
Yeah, good question. No, actually, these are harvested wild. So these are all wild, small fish, mackerel, herring, anchovy. And when I get my material, my omega-3 fatty acids, they tell me exactly where it was harvested. And what they do, the International Fish Oil Association, yeah, so I get a latitude and longitude and the area of the world in which it was harvested. And they absolutely monitor where they're fishing and where they're pulling the omega-3s from, so they don't over farm it. Our oceans it's critical for our oceans to be maintained in a stewardship that is unlike any other resource that we have, and we have to do that. And that's why we're using the IFOS product. And so that's something that I hold near and dear to my heart. The whole idea behind my company is to help and not hurt. And so that's why we use that oil. So so the omega-3 fatty acids that we use are they're molecularly distilled, so they don't have any of the toxins or the heavy metals. All that stuff is taken out, and it's in the triglyceride form, which is the natural form that your body accepts and uses. Most of them are used. If you look at most of the stuff on the market today, it's esterified, so it's esters. And these esters need to be converted in your body, digested and reconverted into a triglyceride form. I don't want to get too deep into the kind of the nerdy science of it, but it takes process and it takes resource of your body to do that, and not everybody can do it equally. So right. We wanted to take one step closer towards the utilization and bioavailability, and that's why I demanded that we only use the triglyceride form. So
let me, and I fully agree with that. And, I'll talk more about my experience with brain omegas as we continue here, but I'm going to, so Kat, to your question about being so confused as a vegan and what type of supplement, I know this rocks your boat. And Dr. Nelson, we've got some really educated people that are here most every week. And I know that your boat is rocked right now. So my encouragement is that do a little reading on this, do a little more of a deep dive. Be skeptical right now if you need to. Skepticism means, I'm not sure I buy that. I'm going to look into it further. Cynicism means, that's a bunch of nonsense. I'm not going to waste my time. So I know that you're here, and I know that I know that, Kat, you're more of a skeptical person, which is great, but do your due diligence so that you are convinced for yourself what the science says. Then you'll make the right choice for you. But I'm assuming that you didn't know this concept, that omega-3s, EPA cannot be converted very well to DHA in adequate amounts. It just can't happen, and that your brain needs DHA much, much more than EPA. Priscilla's here from Waterloo, Iowa. Dwayne says, can I take algae DHA fatty acids instead of fish oil? So that's an interesting question. Dr. Nelson, what do you think?
Yeah, that's an alternative source. It's typically in a phospholipid matrix. We've looked at it. Krill oil is one of them. And so, or algae, you're talking about algae then. So you can,
he said algae.
Yeah, so you can do that. It's just it's a more expensive way. It's, I don't think you get the same concentrations. When I looked at, I had, a clinical practice for nearly 30 years, and I've measured thousands and thousands of patients over the course of that time. And we would have folks that would come in with, that were taking the algae-based omegas, and invariably their omega-3 fatty acid index was dramatically lower. And in order for me to get that level to rise to the level that was commensurate with good health and optimal health, they would have to take almost 6 to 10 times the amount of algae-based omegas they were using. And this got to be cost prohibitive for them. Yeah. So they really had, even though there's a lot of benefit, and I do believe that there is the phospholipid matrix in which those come in is excellent. We have another product that we have. It's astaxanthin, which is an algae-based fat. I just think you're going to end up spending a lot of money to try and move the needle on your omega-3 index.
So one of the pearls that Dr. Nelson just gave us is to measure. Measure and see, what is your index? What's your omega-3 index? What is your blood telling us? And it's a simple pinprick test. And what's your blood telling us about the amount of raw material to feed your brain? Do you have enough of that raw material or not? So that you don't get, well, I'll just take a bunch of fish oil. And the example that he just gave is that this guy was taking lots of fish oil, and he had to take so much more to get the index up because he kept measuring. Is it there yet? Is it there yet? Is it there yet? So do your own due diligence, all of us, and do the brain omega index test. We'll tell you how to do that. We'll tell you how to get the test. It's an inexpensive, easy, no-brainer test to do. Marie is here from Toronto. Allison says, hello from New Jersey. What could be an issue for someone older, above 80, feeling dizzy when they take omega-3s?
Boy, that's one of those questions that you need a lot more information on for sure.
Yeah, you bet.
There's a lot of reasons for dizziness.
Yeah, the first thing that I would think of is that they're incapable or having a hard time digesting their fats well. And how's that gallbladder working? Is their gallbladder working well enough or not? And so I would start there and ask more questions, of course, but that's a place where I would start. Diana's here from California. Hi, Diana. Barbara's here from Texas. Karen from Michigan. Roseanne's in Myrtle Beach. Catherine's in California. Al, A-Y-Y-L. I'm not quite sure how to pronounce that. Ale, maybe? I'm totally confused. Had HLA-DQ2 and 8 genetic testing at LabCorp and Vibrant America. Vibrant says negative for both, but LabCorp says positive for both. Who am I supposed to go with? Do it again. Do the test again, because one of them's wrong. One of them's wrong. And that's the thing about laboratory medicine, and people don't realize, and one would think, well, your genes are your genes, but I've seen errors in genetic tests before. And my tendency is Vibrant, because their sensitivity and specificity has been published as being so high with their technology, but in any event, I do the test again. Or I would call the lab representative and demand that they run the tests again for you at no charge.
Exactly.
Yeah. Allison asked, what are the effects of low water intake on the brain?
Well, they're pretty significant. I mean, number one, your brain is basically surrounded by water. And so your cerebral spinal fluid bathes the brain. And obviously, if you have low water content in general, you're going to have a production issue of CSF. And that can cause some sloshing around in the brain that's not cushioned by that water bed that you're bathing it in. But low water, that's kind of a general term. And does that mean that you've got low blood pressure and you're hypovolemic, or does it mean that you're showing up on some type of water test, like they do those body composition monitors where they can see the intracellular water concentration. Oftentimes, and we did that for years and years and years in our practice. Oftentimes, what that means is that you've got leaky cells, and so the intracellular water concentration is low, secondary to a permeable cell, which could be a composition issue with membranes and fatty acid composition. So I always looked at it through the lens of, how do I keep the water in the cell and not outside the cell, and maintain the hydration of that intracellular milieu.
Agreed. My emphasis also is always on increasing intracellular water. Kathleen said, thank you for your input in Vaccines Revealed. Thank you, Kathleen. That's really nice of you to make a comment on that. Dee's here says, I have digestive issues and often have brain fog. Will omegas help combat my brain fog and memory concerns?
Good question. Yes, it can. It can definitely improve your brain fog and memory. And I can get into the memory thing in great detail. But what's interesting is the leaky gut. If the origin of the brain fog is leaky gut, which it is in the majority of the folks, it's been shown now that the integrity of the cell membrane or the gut can be influenced greatly by the fatty acid composition. So again, it's this membrane story that we're after, and how do we reconstitute the general cell membranes across all organ functions, including the gastrointestinal tract, so that you can have this fortress, this bolstering of your cell membranes. And I know, Dr. O'Brien, you mentioned the idea of this lazy Susan, and I'd also like to introduce a concept that really that I just love and think it's something that's can be very beneficial for people to think about, is that when we look at fat, it's interesting that saturated fat's solid at room temperature, right? So it kind of lines up and crystallizes and stays in a hardened state. And yet we are told not to eat that, and that can be bad for us. And there might be some reasonableness to that. But we can also say that why in the heck is the omega-3 so liquid? And it's because it comes from cold water, fish. And those fish can't be all stoved up and not be able to swim around. So they have to have this omega-3 matrix in order to swim around. Now, if you think about that, and we put that into our cell membrane, what ends up happening is that membrane then starts to become what we call fluid. And it flexes and molds and adjusts to the actual signal molecules that want to bind to it. And when that molecule can't bind to it, and it can't allow that, and that cell can't conform enough to allow that receptor to bind to the molecule, like a hormone, like insulin, like some of these very important molecules that signal our cells, then this receptivity to that influence, that molecule, is lost, and we become dampened down to how our body's responding to this milieu of molecules that are trying to bind to the cell and turn on or turn off or modulate and influence the biology of our bodies. There's no other place where it's more important than the brain, because the brain is the central nervous system and it controls everything. And so you can imagine that if you've grown a whole lifetime without adequate levels of omega-3s, and this fluid dynamic cell membrane in your brain is losing its ability to receive information and receive the molecules that are trying to talk to it and allow it to communicate from cell to cell, you're losing a piece of you. You're losing your ability to maintain cognition and function of the entire body, but also your mood, mind, and memory. And that's what really is important. So when we think about having adequate levels of omega-3s, certainly it's very important for the brain, the DHA, but more importantly, and equally as important, I should say, is it's important for the signaling of all the biology in the body for this fluid dynamics.
You know, I'm going to add on to that. This concept, as Dr. Nelson's talking about fluid dynamics, he's talking about how cells are adapting and moving and connecting and communicating to each other. That's what the lazy Susan's analogy is, you know, and whether it's rusty or not, you know, whether it can get through or not. And this concept of having adequate amounts of the good fats is so critical. I learned about this, and after I read this study, I was done. Absolutely, it's essential for the rest of my professional career. And it was a study in the Journal of the American Medical Association. I don't remember how many children, but it was in the hundreds of children who were diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And one of the criteria was that they all were on medications like Ritalin or Adderall. And they gave them fish oils, not the highest quality fish oils, as Dr. Nelson's talking about, but just fish oils. And they gave them a dosage that was, I think it was 1 gram, 1,000 milligrams total, if I'm remembering correctly. And 6 months later, over 50% of the kids were off their medications, and their performance in school had gone up substantially. Over half the kids, just by taking fish oils. Why? Because when you, Mrs. Patient, every cell in your body regenerates, every single cell. Some cells are really quick, some are slow. So when you're regenerating your brain cells, if the raw material you've got is higher quality material. The good fit, the DHA pushes out the bad fats from the membranes of the brain cells and replaces, if you have to fix a part of the cell here, well, now you've got the good fats to do it, so that cell becomes a little more pliable, communicative with the cell next to it. And 6 months later, half the kids, just over half the kids, were off their meds from their doctors, with the parents' request and from the doctors, off their medication, doing better in school. That was a jaw dropper for me. When I saw that one, I realized that's our future, is our kids, and just giving them the right food made such a difference in half of them.
Yeah, I remember that study. It was like you say, jaw dropping, and it was so impactful for so many people, and it really made them take notice of what's going on with the kids and what their diet is doing to them, and how that can be influenced by supplementation.
Right, exactly. Let's see. Homer says, thank you, Dr. Nelson, for answering my question. Okay.
You're welcome.
Christine says, glycerin in daily oral medications, is it bad to take? Tiro, let me get my glasses on here. Tirosint, which is a thyroid medication, only contains inactive ingredients in tirosint are gelatin, glycerin, and water. I cannot take any of the other thyroid pills due to the lactose and fillers and binders. This is the only thyroid medication I can take without a reaction. So you're asking about the sensitivity of glycerin or the safety of glycerin. I really can't comment on that one. I don't know. Dr. Nelson, do you have some information on that one?
Yeah, I don't know, but glycerin is used in so many products as a lubricant and a flow agent and a binder that I would imagine it might even be grass at this point. So generally recognized as safe by the FDA. Of course, that doesn't mean much today, but grass is better than non-grass. So I haven't seen any studies on it, and I know Dr. Vajani, and he would probably has ran something on it, or some of the other guys that have ran some type of immune assays on that.
Right. Kathleen asks, so what do you feel are the best omega-3s? Well, since you asked, and that's why we're here.
That's a loaded question. So I've got, I don't know if you folks probably don't know who I am, but I actually have my own manufacturing facility. I purchased a FDA registered facility. I manufacture all my products. I did it because I wasn't seeing made what I wanted made, and I didn't want to just go to somebody else and make it. So I ended up taking the bull by the horns and developing my entire line of products, and all my equipment I own all the encapsulators, the tableters, the bottling machines, all that. My whole team works, all week long to make sure that we've got the best products in the world. And one of the key elements within the Brain Bean line was I need to have an omega-3 because it is absolutely critical for the brain. And so I started doing my homework, and I'd been doing my homework for many years. Obviously, as a functional medicine practitioner, you're pretty well versed in the omega-3 story. And I could easily have just done a regular omega-3, but what I found during my research, and this is going back about 6 years ago now, is I ran across a body of literature that was in the optometry journals. And you're probably wondering, what the heck does an optometry journal have to do with the brain? Well, it turns out the eye is basically the brain. The brain is, a protrusion coming out of your skull we call the orbit or the eye. And I pulled out this book because this is John Dowling. John Dowling is one of the preeminent Harvard researchers in the world on the retina. And here's his book right here, and it says the retina. This is what medical students will read. But that's all they say. It's the retina, John Dowling's book, The Retina. But if you look at the bottom there, it's the approachable part of the brain. Mm-hmm. And so what he was trying to explain in his book is this is the way to look at the brain. And so I started looking at the research, and I found that the optometry research was really interested in fatty acids. And they were starting to show signs that you could pick up in the eye that related to the brain, related to omega-3s. So I went in and started looking at how I would put together a formula to actually improve the functionality of the omega-3. And it was all based on the research that was coming out of Tufts, Harvard, OHSU, a bunch of prestigious institutions that were all showing this amazing, and they're still advancing this research at quite a high velocity right now. And what I found was that they were all looking at DHA because of the brain, right? 90% of the fatty acids in the brain are DHA, the N3 type. But what most people don't know is DHA sits alongside or co-localizes. This is the term they use in the research. It co-localizes, meaning it sits right next to a substance called lutein. Now, most of your audience probably knows about lutein because of the eye and how it can impact a thing called age-related macular degeneration. I just told you that the brain is part of, or the eye is part of the brain. And the leading cause of blindness right now is age-related macular degeneration. And that's primarily caused, one of the major reasons it's caused is aging, for sure, but the other is exposure to blue light. Now we're looking at a screen right now, and that blue light is oxidizing the photoreceptors in the back of your eye called the macula, and it's denaturing that receptor, and it's causing damage. And you can actually see that this is impacting the brain as well. So when I started, I'll get back to the storyline here, but when I started developing the formulation for Brain Omega, I knew that I had to have both DHA and lutein together in order for lutein to protect DHA from oxidation. And that's what it does. So DHA is the longest fatty acid in the human body. It's this huge, long fatty acid that's easily oxidized. Now your brain is sitting up there doing, all this work, and it's consuming 25 to 30% of all your energy at rest, meaning that there's a lot of metabolic activity. Whenever you have a lot of metabolic activity, you have a lot of free radical activity. That free radical activity, the first thing it does is it oxidizes what's next to it. That's the fatty acids. And if you do not have lutein with DHA, you're going to oxidize the most important fatty acid in your brain, DHA. And this causes you to start to see shrinkage in the brain. You can see when you look at the research, the lower the concentration of DHA we have in our brains, the smaller our brains get. And the area that suffers the most is the hippocampus. And the hippocampus is where we form long-term memories and maintain consolidation of memory and are able to recall things and have word fluency and have the ability to think and remember and enjoy our lives and to be who we are based on the memories that we've consolidated within the hippocampus. And as we lose the hippocampus volume, it's a marker for brain degeneration. And so that's why I came up with this particular formulation. It's all based on some just astounding research that has come out of all these major institutions. And so when you ask the question,
Dr. Nelson, if I can just pause there, because I never thought about this before. I've been talking about this report, and I've shared it with you, that came out from Blue Cross Blue Shield last year. Yeah. The largest health insurance for-profit company, certainly in the US and maybe in the world. And they published a report last year that said there has been a 406% increase between 2013 and 2017. In 4 years, there's been a 406% increase in the diagnosis of Alzheimer's in 30 to 44-year-olds. Yeah. 406% in 4 years.
Yeah.
And I'm just putting together, this is the age bracket that dove into the computer first, spending hours and hours and hours in the computer. So are these screens, are these blue light screens frying our brain, coming through the eyes, frying our brain?
Well, they're probably frying our eyes. What's interesting is the NHANES studies looked at the consumption of lutein in our diet, and we're woefully inadequate in that, meaning that we do not get nearly enough. So what I think we're seeing is a confluence of factors that are impacting us. The poor diet, the screen time. Now, not only is screen time impacting our retina, but it's also changing the biology, the circadian biology that we all live and die by, right? So when the sun comes up, we should get up. When the sun goes down, we should go down. And we don't do that anymore because we've got the sun shining all the time in our smartphones and our screens. And yet we need that stimulus very early in the morning for us to start to engage in that biological imperative that takes place when the sun comes up, which is, hey, let's get up, drop down melatonin, and let's move forward, and let's come to life. Well, if anybody's had any sleep disturbances and they've been on their computer, they don't need to ask why. They just need to turn their screens off earlier. And they need to start using filters in their eyewear so that they can hold on to that. But I think it's a combination of things, Dr. O'Brien. I think that there's quite a bit to it. On top of the fact that for the last, I don't know how long, we have not been getting enough of the fatty acids in our diet. Period. And this is transgenerational, just so you know. This is passed down from generation to generation to generation. And now we've got multiple generations now that are being impacted by this low intake of omega-3 fatty acids along with lutein. And we're seeing the demise of the human condition before our very eyes. And when you see 407% or 6% people developing dementia at an early stage, I can tell you right now, if we don't do anything, if these listeners are not going to do anything, they could be ending up in that statistical pool that they don't want to be in.
Agreed. Fully agreed. Kat made another comment, and she said, I will, in capital letters, look into this further as a vegan. It's gross to me to think about using fish, but I believe what Dr. Nelson says. No, I didn't know this. I will research. Thank you. What is this doctor's product? So that's exactly the best thing we could hope for, Kat, is that you're saying, I'm going to really dive into this. I'm not just going to take this at face value, but I'm going to look into this more. That is great. And high five to you for that, for making that declaration. So, and we are talking about the product. And in doing that, Jill's question is, what concentration is recommended per day? And is there a particular type of time of day for better absorption?
Good question. So, this idea of biochemical individuality is really important to understand, meaning that we're all different, our needs are different, our absorption levels are different, and the only way to really understand your level is to test it. Like Dr. O'Brien was mentioning, you have to have a starting point, a test that can determine where you're at within the range of where you should be. And that's your starting point. I am an ApoE4 carrier, meaning that, yeah. So I'm a heterozygous ApoE4. And I get that every once in a while, right? Like, oh my goodness, you're gonna, have, and that's actually one of the reasons why I developed this product line, was for me and others that are in this condition. And I know a lot about ApoE4. And one thing I do know for certain is ApoE4s have a tremendous difficulty in absorbing the omega-3 fatty acids. And so when I first started using the testing, this is many years ago, my levels were 3, and you want to get them above 10. So, and I can tell you that it took me super physiological levels to get my levels to finally eclipse 10 and move over the line where I want.
What does that mean, supra-physiological? What does that mean?
Yeah, so I took I'll take I was taking up to 6 grams of omega-3 fatty, DHA primarily, when I was really trying to achieve that. And I got it there, dropped it down to 4, and that's where I'm at now. And I consistently take that.
And you check every once in a while to make sure that your levels are where they need to be.
I check every quarter.
Yeah, because it's a simple finger prick test.
It's easy.
That's all it is.
I want to also emphasize something that, the brain's important for the omega-3s. And it's going to take the longest to replete the brain with the omega-3s, because the brain is post-mitotic, meaning it's not turning over nearly as fast as your skin does. So you'll see the results in your skin and maybe your intestinal tract much sooner than you're going to see in your brain. So you have to give it time. And I tell people, have the long outlook on this. Look 10, 15 years down the road. You'll move your number, but you want to hold that number in an elevated state for a long period of time so that that substrate gets seeped into the tissues that are not that fast in the replication process. That will then help to secure and bolster your position as you get into older age. And I know we have a regenerative crowd here. I want to mention one other thing, that the one thing that really impressed me with anti-aging in omega-3s, that it was the one factor that improved telomere length better than any other product. So if you want to improve telomeres,
would you tell us what improving telomere length means?
So telomeres are at the end of your chromosomes. They're these things that get shorter the more the cell goes through oxidative stress and replication. And there's only so much of that. And the telomeres have been used as a way to gauge your biological age. So I could be chronologically 61 years old, that I am, but my biological age could be more in line with a 35-year-old, which I am. So you can actually start to recapitulate your aging process and reestablish a normal aging and regenerate aging or your body in a very profound way by using some of these tools.
Yeah, agreed. And that's a whole nother discussion that we will do another time. We're going to stay focused here on brain function today, but just to let you know that there is that available, and we both have a number of friends whose biological age is younger, their biological age is younger than their chronological age. And that's another test that can be done. But let's talk about the brain omega test. Let's talk about that one for a minute. How do you do this test?
So it's really a simple test. You get a kit. The kit has a lancet in it. It's got an impregnated piece of paper in it that you'll put you'll lance your finger. It's doesn't hurt, and you'll get the blood to incorporate into a circle on this test, and then you'll send it into our lab. Our lab will then analyze it. We'll send back the results, and we'll tell you where your brain omega levels are. And we'll tell you where you want to be too. So if you're below, in my opinion, if you're below 8, you're at risk. And most people, the vast majority of people running around today that have not been taking care of their health, or might be, kind of sporadically using an omega-3 fatty acid supplement, are going to be in the range of 4. And the real benefit comes when you can achieve that 8+ level and even higher. And we know that in the blue zones have the highest level of the omega-3 levels. And those people are living healthfully into their hundreds. And so you really want to, and then again, it comes back to the cell membrane, the integrity of the fluid dynamics, the ability for the cell not to be so inflamed, and your body just to work better. So you want to take the test and then determine what that level is, and then use that test to gauge what your impact is with your supplementation regime or your eating regime. It's really going to be difficult to eat enough fish today to get that level up there. And it's just you'd be hard pressed to move the needle much.
For those of you that are not familiar with what Dr. Nelson is referring to as the blue zones, for all of my patients, I've said this so many times, if there's one book that you read more than any other book to have the greatest impact on how you think about taking care of yourself, the book is The Blue Zones. That scientists found there are places in the world where a large percentage of the population live into their 80s, their 90s, over 100, no medications, fully functional, still engaging every day, doing work, and valuable members of society. A high percentage of people in those age brackets. And on a map, they circled these places around the world, like Okinawa, Costa Rica, Sardinia. They found a blue zone outside of LA. And they said, what? What? And they couldn't, what? And that's when they realized it wasn't the water, it wasn't the air, it was how people were taking care of themselves. And there are 9 factors to a blue zone life. And the book, this is the book where the pedal hits the metal. You want to live a long and vital life? You read the blue zones. And as Dr. Nelson said, one of the common links in blue zone cultures is that they have higher concentrations of DHA in their diets. Critically important concept.
Yeah. 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 So the test is really beneficial. It's super easy to do. I think it's absolutely critical. I would highly recommend, if there's children out there that you're concerned about their brain health, do it on your kids. I brought out some Brain Omega, and I just want to show people. So Brain Omega has a very special form of lutein in it. It's got Lutamax 2020. It's a patented form. It's got multiple clinical trials on humans. It's been shown to protect your eye against blue light. It's been shown to increase your macular pigment density, which means that it's increasing the level of lutein in your brain. And your brain, just so you know, preferentially absorbs lutein more than any other carotenoid, even though we get very little in our diet and we need more. And the best, one of the best places to get lutein is actually eggs. It's in the yolk. That's what makes the eggs yellow. So each one of these little pills, I don't know if you guys can see that. That's a Brain Omega pill. This is a regular pill of omega-3s. There's a big difference. And I specifically did the size and the concentration so that children could use it. And I wanted children to begin, you'd have to swallow it, but I wanted children to begin to consume this so that they can actually help and nurture their brain at a very early age. Obviously, adults need to take it too, and it's easy to swallow for adults. A lot of adults don't like to take the big horse pills, and they choke on them, and that's then gets into a compliance issue. So the Brain Omega product is really simple to take. And you can take multiple at one time if you so choose. I tell people it's about the size of a raisin, and the Lutamax in there is highly concentrated. So it's a wonderful way to get both the DHA. I skewed it towards a highly concentrated form of DHA, not EPA. So that's thus the term Brain Omega. And this is designed specifically for your brain health, and the combination of the lutein, and it's actually got all 3 of the xanthines in there. It's got lutein, zeaxanthine, and mesozeaxanthine in the exact ratios as you find in nature. And so that's the other beautiful thing that they do. And the other thing, Dr. O'Brien, I think you'll really like, and I'll send you this article, that it increased brain-derived neurotrophic factor, the Lutamax 2020 that we use in that product, increased BDNF, which is miracle grow for your brain that causes brains to regenerate. It increased it by something like 300%. Wow. It was remarkable. Yeah.
Wow. That is remarkable. BDNF is the target goal for all clinicians trying to help patients' brains feel better and function better. That's the target, is to increase BDNF. First, stop throwing gasoline on the fire, whatever the lifestyle habits are that are causing increased inflammation in the brain. But then when you want to rebuild, the goal is, what can I give to help rebuild BDNF? And that this does it by over 300%. This is the fish oils that Marzi and I take, and I've sent to my grandchildren, is the Brain Omegas. Because when I met Dr. Nelson and he told me all of this that we're telling you, it dropped my jaw. And I just said, thank you to the guy. Thanks so much, man, for this being your passion. I mean, this is the best omega product I've ever heard of. And I've been taking it now for months and just really enjoyed. My body feels good when I take it. It just feels right.
Awesome. Yeah.
So we have a question from Amanda in Australia. She says, love to hear any simple tests that don't need doctor referral. Okay, thank you, Amanda. That's great. Phil, Fi Gale. I would love a coupon for the Brain Omega. Was just thinking to get a new brain supplement plus omegas. Well, we've got something for you here that it's time to talk about, actually. This goes so fast. We don't have that much time left. So, Dr. Nelson, you've been really kind about this topic tonight, and you've brought a gift here for people. Do you want to talk about that?
Sure. I'm giving away 100 bottles of our Brain Omega product for free. So anybody that's interested in trying it, it's the first 100 will get a free bottle. We've kind of restricted it just because we've also got to keep our doors open. But anybody that's looking to have, and it's not a sample bottle, it's a full-fledged, complete bottle. So I think it's $55 or something on our website. And so anybody that wants to do that can just go sign up on our landing page. They'll get a code, and if the code's working, then you get the free bottle. If it's not, then we've already fulfilled the 100 people that were looking for it. So I just really appreciate the opportunity to present this message and to get to get this out there to people, because I know for certain nobody knows the impact that both lutein and DHA have on brain. And so this is the key message that I want people to take away. And I'll just end with one last quick little research study that was so impactful on my formulating this product. When I saw the Georgia Centenarian study, the Georgia Centenarian study was a study where they looked at Georgian people in the state of Georgia that were that were aged, and they weren't suffering from necessarily any dementia or anything. And they wanted to determine whether or not the impact of using a lutein and DHA supplement would impact their memory. They used almost the identical formula that I came up with, and they saw profound improvement. And they also saw profound improvement because all these people that were entering their 100th, their 10th decade of life donated their brains to science, and they dissected their brains. And they found that these brains were actually more enriched with lutein and DHA. So it's not pixie dust. It works. We've sold lots and lots of bottles of this, and it helps with your mood, mind, and memory, which is our primary objective with our company.
I'm going to ask you for that study. So everyone, as I'm sure you now agree, Dr. Nelson is great. The guy's passionate about what he does, which is why he's my friend. And I love his products. They are the primary products I take on a daily basis. We're going to come back here at Facebook Live again and again with Dr. Nelson to talk about different brain products. But the first product we wanted to talk about was Brain Omega, because it's top priority. If there's one thing you're going to take, you got to start with getting your lazy Susans greased so you can communicate better between your brain cells, right? That's number one. And when you go to his site, you'll see there's so many other products there. Feel free to explore them and try some of them. And get the test done, do the Brain Omega test to see what your index is. That's your starting point. And it's not going to be good, most likely. That's okay. And then you start with the products, and then you check. When's it realistic to do a recheck? 3 months, 6 months?
Yeah, I would give it 4 to 6 months. Yeah,
Good.
it's like a hemoglobin A1C. It takes about 3 to 5 months to really move the index.
Right, right. So there you go. So if you say, this is worth trying out, this just makes sense. So plan on doing 6 months of it and do a test now, the Brain Omega, and then do another one in 6 months. I mean, you'll notice your brain's functioning better, but get the records of how it's functioning better. Then think about these 100-year-olds in Georgia that when they donate their brains, right? And they found these brains are younger, these brains are more pliable, these brains, we don't see this in 100-year-olds. So what if they had started when they were in their 40s or their 50s at taking these products? What would have happened for those people? I mean, my goal, my example is when I did the gluten summit, I interviewed 29 world leaders, and the first person I interviewed was Professor Michael Marsh at Oxford. And when gastroenterologists order an exam to see if you have celiac, the report comes back Marsh 1, Marsh 2, Marsh 3. This is Marsh. This is the godfather of all celiac diagnosis. And he was 74 at the time. He had never been interviewed. And you can see the interview. They're all free. All 29 were free at theDr.com/gluten summit. But when I met with Professor Marsh, he told me that he had retired 3 years ago, and he was just completing his second PhD. He got 2 PhDs after his retirement at 74. That's a brain that told me that it's really possible to have your brain continue working for you well into your 70s and 80s and 90s if you learn how to take care of it.
Exactly.
And I fervently believe Brain Omega and the suite of products at Brain Bean Nutrition, including this great coffee that he's got, and we'll do a whole episode about this coffee, Brain Bean coffee. But I fervently believe that these products are a very valuable contribution, and I'm going to put a lot of my time in this next year into bringing more of this information to everyone out there. So, Dr. Nelson, thank you so much for being here tonight. This is great. Everyone's going to get so much out of it. And everyone, we will see you next week, same time, same place. Thank you so much.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.